Mark, it's great to see you again. Adam's telling me the president just has signed this latest piece of aid for folks. What's your view on this next piece of PPP? As you know, it's come with some restrictions, right? That public companies are not supposed to be applying, hedge funds, private equity not supposed to be applying. Is this money going to get to the people who need it?
It's not going to be enough, but at least it's a step in the right direction. At least we excluded some of the folks that should have been excluded the first time around. And we'll find out. I mean, the challenge has been the timing as much as amount, because here we are 3 weeks in. And so, a lot of these small companies are closed, just barely hanging on. And hopefully this will get them through when we're back open, because that's part two to this whole thing. You have the money now, you're pretty much required to pay your employees in order to turn it into a grant, but you're not open and servicing any customers. And so will it run out before you're able to open your doors wherever you happen to live?
Hey, Mark, thanks for joining us. It's Julia LaRoche. I saw this report yesterday where an entrepreneur said that her employees were upset that she got the PPP because they felt that, with the $600 a week additional boost of unemployment, that they would be making more without. And to the point, some folks are supposedly going to be making more with the unemployment and that federal supplement there, that $600 I just referenced. So I guess my question for you, Mark, is do you think that we're going to have a rethink of wages when we emerge from this? And do you also think that maybe there'll be an issue around labor costs when we start to reopen the economy?
So a couple questions there. One, there's quarantine business math, right? And that's changed because every company is going through that equilibrium of A, we're shutting down, B, I need that PPP money just to pay my overhead and hopefully keep my employees attached, and C, my employees in a lot of cases, depending on what state or where you live, can make more getting unemployment insurance in that plus $600. And so that's where each company's just got to do the math themselves. In terms of going forward, right, we're in a very unique position where we basically in a month have seen 50 million people become unemployed or underemployed. And so when we come back, there's going to be a completely new dynamic. And the biggest challenge in my mind is that people need money to be able to spend on things, right? Opening up companies is great, but if nobody has any money to spend there, then that's a real challenge. So I personally think this is a chance, this reset is an opportunity for us to do a couple new things that 4 months ago, I would have been totally against. But now in this new world, I think we need to increase the minimum wage to $15 because I think this is the time to do it. The hot job market before pushed a lot of wages up anyways, but for those people who are under getting paid or not getting paid enough and can't live on their wages, that needs to change. And I think we need a federal jobs program. We can't survive with 50 million people unemployed. And when we go back after this reset, companies are going to have learned that they can do just as much with a lot less.
Mark, it's Adam. Good to see you. You talk to a lot of bankers, and I was curious. You've shared that the bankers have real fears about complying with PPP, about what might happen to them down the road, but you're also advocating for businesses, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was on a podcast where you were saying businesses should just overdraw their accounts at banks and let the Fed take care of it. How would that actually work?
So a couple different things. One, initially, the goal was to get as much money into businesses' hands as possible so that they can continue business as usual, right? So I was all for an overdraft protection program because with that, day one, March 11th, March 12th, if you were able just to overdraft your bank account, then you would be able to continue paying your employees. They can stay attached. And the goal was not to have so many layoffs or so many firings, right? And now going forward, I still think an overdraft program is better. Because think of the way the PPP program works. The banks just deposit on average $206,000 into a company's account. That money is spent, that money is pre-allocated, and that means it's going to sit in accounts rather than going into communities and being spent right off the bat as companies try to stretch that as long as they can. And two, there's no fraud protection. If I have a company or somebody has a company, they get the $206,000 and they go out and buy a Lamborghini, there's nothing anybody can do. And so with overdraft protection, that's a program that all banks already have in place. And my orientation was to say, if the Fed makes them whole at the end of the day for those expenses that were spent on things that the PPP supported as a grant, employee and employee-related expenses, and also rent, utilities, those types of things, then it's a grant. And for other things, because the banks can look at the check, then that converts into a loan each and every day, and then that bank will service that loan, but they're made whole by the Feds.
Hey, Mark, it's Julia again. I was having this conversation with a CEO recently, and a lot of companies using the PPP, as you're just referencing, it's kind of because they have to make up for the losses. They need to survive right now, because a lot of companies are essentially, at this point, they're basically eating themselves, is how it was described to me. My question for you, though, is how do we kind of spur growth again and get that economic engine running? Because the money is going toward the losses and to keep them afloat at this point. How do we jumpstart the growth?
You have to have demand, right? In the past, we've done trickle down, where we've said, we'll get money to the banks, we'll get money into insurance companies, and we'll, make interest rates so low that people like me will continue to invest. But I mean, there's a lot of money on the sidelines. There's just nothing that you can invest in because there's no demand. And so that's why I think the federal jobs program is so critical. And I'll give you a perfect example. Tracking and testing, right? If we were to train 2, 3, 4 million people and train them as healthcare providers and teach them to work within HIPAA protocols, now we're doing something that this country needs, tracking and tracing and training people, so that come this fall, when we're back in flu season and potentially facing a resurgence of the coronavirus, we have everything in place that we need to track it and do the best job we can in accumulating information to fight it. That's one. Part two, look what's happening with our demographics. We're aging very rapidly, and we don't have enough long-term care. There's not enough facilities to deal with all the elderly that are aging, right? And we don't have the healthcare workers right now. So why not train millions of people to be healthcare workers? Why not include, as part of an infrastructure program, building long-term care facilities? That way we get some of those 50 million unemployed and underemployed people back to work. You're not going to get the unemployment rate back to 5% immediately, but you're certainly going to reduce it, and that produces jobs, and that gets money into the economy, which stimulates demand, which is what you're going to need in order to get investment.
Mark, is there any kind of appetite for the kind of program you're talking about? And I don't mean among people who need jobs, I mean in the government. And by the same token, if you look at trust in government, I mean, I don't have a survey figure in front of me about what the trust in government was like in the Depression, right, when they first came out with it. But the trust in government is not huge right now, I think it's safe to say. So do the American people have the confidence in the federal government to enact prudently and judiciously a program like you're talking about?
No. They don't. I don't either. And I'll give you a fundamental issue that we're facing as a country right now. All the candidates that were nominated for the election coming up in November were nominated on the premise that we were in a booming economy, that there were certain things we liked and certain things we didn't like. I mean, we saw the people who followed Bernie Sanders and his movement, right? But everybody that's nominated right now has not really even had to communicate and wasn't nominated because they understood how to deal with the circumstances we're in now. So not only is there a lack of trust, but we don't pick candidates that are best suited. So we're caught in this catch-22. And so to answer your question, they don't trust. But at the same time, the bigger question is, what happens if we don't do it?
Mark, hey, Rick Newman here. I assume you're in Texas. And you're a business owner, obviously. The governor there is talking about beginning to reopen some businesses. Is Texas ready for that?
So reopen is the exact wrong word, and they made a huge mistake in using the word reopen. What they should have said is, you know what, we have a lot of experience in drop-offs and pickup and non-handling deliveries. Any company who can do that within their business, so that you can't open your doors, but if you're a hardware shop and somebody wants to ordered 4 hammers and wants to pick up 4 hammers and some nails, and you put it out front just like you see at restaurants, and someone comes and picks it up, that protocol is already in place. We already have experience. I have no problem extending the ability to do drop off and pickup for any type of business. But the idea of opening up retail establishments so customers go inside is absolutely wrong. not because the science may or may not be there, but because small businesses, even if the science was there, small businesses don't have the protocols in place in order to be able to protect their employees and protect their customers. And it's just some basic things. You know, a retail clothing store, someone wants to come in and try on something. 4 months ago, if you didn't like it, you put it back on the rack. What are you going to do today? You're at a restaurant. Somebody sneezes into their mask and leaves it right on the table. Do you have is that hazardous materials? You know, do you have the protocol in place to deal with it? What about your HVAC? Somebody comes in and is sick, doesn't show any symptoms, you know, does the whole aerosol thing, and the HVAC just circulates it. You know, there's so many things that we don't know how to deal with, and we don't have protocols in place that haven't been considered. So I'm okay with pickups. I'm okay with deliveries for any business, not just food. But I'm not okay with opening the doors for customer traffic.
Yeah, let's not even get started on getting our hair cut again, Mark. It's funny, Julia was just talking about not wanting to try on clothes in stores right now. So she's right there with you. We've been speaking with Mark Cuban about his view of some of the aid programs out there and potential other programs that could help as well. This as we're seeing the S&P 500 rise by about 0.4% here to end the week. Mark, the last time we talked with you, the president had just announced that he was going to be having this sort of advisory council on reopening with a number of different CEOs. You were included on that list, I believe. You were just talking about reopening in Texas and what that would have to look like, and that there's still a lot of pieces that need to get put in place. If you're talking about a broader scale and talking about nationally, what are the things that we need to think about, and what have you or would you tell the president on that front?
I basically communicated the exact things we just talked about. Protocols in place, whether it's from the CDC or somewhere else, so that businesses understand what's involved to get back open and how to protect their employees and customers. Payment programs, what changes and adjustments in the PPP. I haven't had a chance to read it to see if any of my suggestions got in there. But I'll give them credit. We haven't had a follow-up call, but they assigned somebody to me who's been very responsive to all my emails. So I give them credit for being responsive.
Hey, Mark, Julia again. In the last several weeks now, I'm sure you've probably had a lot of time to do quite a bit of reflecting, and I know we all have pretty much. And I'm wondering if in this period, if you've changed your mind on anything, whether it's, policy, the role of government, or, the role of corporations, if there's anything that's kind of shifted for you that maybe even surprised you.
Everything. 100%. I mean, I read Ayn Rand. I was, Howard Rourke. I was libertarian. I was, I thought government had a role, but smaller government was always better than bigger government, and that all changed. If you were to ask me 4 months ago whether I thought we could lose 26 million jobs and potentially many more within the space of a month, I would have said, you're crazy. There's just no way that's going to happen. And so dogma's got to go out the window. And so, a federal jobs program, I would have been against that. Federal minimum wage, I would have been against that. There's just so many things that I think we need to do now. And that's what entrepreneurs do. That's what, leaders do. When you face the circumstances you have and you deal with it. Effectively, all these $1 trillion investments are a put but this put has got to be not for the wealthy and not for big business, but for working people. Because unless we lift up from the bottom, we're not going to have any consumer demand. And it doesn't matter how much liquidity is in the system, the risk hasn't left the system.
So, Mark, based on what you just said, this question will annoy Dagny Taggart and John Gold, but my Ayn Rand reference. Why not, after we get past, as we slowly start to bring up, why not, based on what you just said about demand, why not have the government? There are 200 million adults in the United States. Send every adult $1,000 a month. I think, forgive me because I get zeroed out. That would be roughly, we're talking about $200 billion a month. Wouldn't that be a more effective way to deal with what we're dealing with as opposed to these programs?
Absolutely not. Look, and I know the UBIers are like Bitcoiners. They're going to come and attack when I tell you what I'm about to tell you. But first, I'm not against UBI for a partner who stays home to watch children, right? That makes sense because that's a job and that has value. But I'm going to quote JFK or paraphrase JFK. Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country, because we need people to contribute. And while UBI is great for individuals and gives them a lot of creative control and personal control over their life, and that's great, right now we need people to contribute to the economy. And if that means a federally guaranteed job where you're working as a crossing guard managed by the folks at AmeriCorps or the people in the Peace Corps or whatever organization, then I'm fine with that. If it's a federally created job for testing and tracing, that is going to contribute to the economy because we need people to do those jobs. Otherwise, we fall behind. So maybe in another world, UBI is a great solution, but where we are today, other than for partners staying home with kids, I'm not a fan.
Mark, Rick Newman again. You can tell we're about the finance geeks because we haven't asked you once about sports. So here's
That's okay.
So how does the NBA and other sports leagues, how do you get back to having games without fans?
Yeah, I mean, games without fans for sure. I mean, you're already seeing the PGA and NASCAR and even horse racing do some of the same things where essential employees are tested. And we'll do the same thing as soon as we think the science is ready and everybody can be safe.
Any idea when?
No, none.
Mark, it's Julia again. The last time I asked you at the request of another CEO if you would consider running for office, particularly the president. And you did say a lot of things have changed, everything's changed. And I'm starting to see a lot more calls for Mark Cuban 2020. So I want to get an update on that. And what do you think is missing right now from leadership in DC? And what do you think is kind of the quality that the president should have?
So leadership is missing. That's the key. And I think the people don't have someone they truly trust. Everything's so partisan. So everything's presented from a Republican or Democratic perspective. That's number one. Number two, there hasn't been a vision stated how we're going to get there. There's no transparency. There's no honesty. You know, there's an attempt at communication, but without the transparency and honesty and vision, it's hard to know what's real and what's not real. And so, you know, I'm not ready to announce anything. Obviously, time is shortening, but I do support an organization called the Center for Competitive Democracy.org, who sues people to get people sue states and the federal government to get people on the ballot. And we just won a situation in Illinois to make it easier for independent parties and individual candidates to get on the presidential ballot. So behind the scenes, I'm keeping the doors open, but I haven't made any decision yet.
Mark, what do you think would need to happen for you to even step up to that challenge, if you will? Like, what is it that would need to happen for you personally?
I mean, obviously my family was against it. Otherwise, I already would have done it. But again, this is crazy, right? What's going on? I expect walkers from The Walking Dead to start pounding on my door. It's just so surreal. And so you just don't know what's going to happen next. And here we are facing 50 million people that are unemployed and underemployed, and that number is going to grow. And nobody's coming up with any solutions whatsoever. And that's a real problem. And I think we're going to start to see over the next couple of weeks that demand doesn't come back. Even when states open up, hoping it'll be the same as it was, it won't be the same. And if that's the case, and there's no solutions coming from anywhere, or all the solutions are dogmatic and partisan, that's when I think that door might open up some.
Mark, maybe end on a different note if we can. If I can get a little mushy here, is there anything that makes you hopeful that you're seeing right now? Any changes coming out of this that you think are going to be really positive?
Yeah, I mean, you know, despite the horror of it all, this is the best time ever to start a business. And there's no country in the world that's better at starting companies, that has more entrepreneurs, that has a greater entrepreneurial spirit than the United States of America. And so when we look back in 5 years, 10 years, whatever it is, there's going to be 25 or 50 world-class companies that were created specifically because the pandemic of 2020 happened. Things that changed the world. That's part one. Part two, this is our chance to really invest in America 2.0. We can invest in robotics and technology that give us the opportunity to, you know, deal with the problems that are just in our lap right now. The fact that we're not able to control our own destiny because we don't manufacture core things that we need, whether it's products, PPE, or even drugs, we can start bringing those things back. There's an appetite for investing in those things right now. You know, we don't dominate in AI like we need to. And this is a chance for us to create infrastructure 2.0. We're looking, you know, for climate change, you know, self-driving vehicles. There's no cars on the road. Now's the time to adjust the roads and build overpasses and making it safer. You know, and if you're an entrepreneur out there and you're thinking about starting a business, do it. If you have a vision for America 2.0, it's going to come from somebody 16 or 60. We don't know. But when we come out on the other side, we're going to need people with that vision. And all you have to do is ask yourself, why not me? Why not us? Why can't we be the people who create that vision and change the world? Because now is the perfect time to do it. So yeah, I'm hopeful. Yeah, I'm excited. Yeah, I think this country is going to come out, ahead of the game, but it's not going to happen immediately. It's going to be 3, 5, who knows, however many years when we look back and say all the economic, destruction is behind us, but we will get there. That's what we do.
A call to arms. Mark Cuban, thank you so much for joining us again. It was great to get your perspective. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. Thanks for all the questions.